And I thought I would get her back to Godhead and see if I can give her back to Godhead when they come. So I run in the bhajan kutir and got her back to Godhead. I come out, and Prabhupada was still already standing there. He had come out the bhajan kutir also. And he was just standing in front of the deities. And he looked at me and he said, "Why you're not here?" He said, "You see the guests are coming and there's no one here." The first people who've been in about a couple of weeks. He said, "No one is here." He said, "People are coming." He said, "You should be here." I said, "I just wanted to get back to Godhead, Prabhupada," and I just come out. And then he was kind of looking at me and it seemed to be saying, "What are you making all these excuses for?" He was kind of smiling. I remember the first time I gave Prabhupada Chanamrita there, and my hand was shaking uncontrollably. And I was looking at my hand, I was thinking, why is it happening like this? It never happened before like that. It was really just uncontrollably shaking. And he just kind of looked at me and smiled. And he took the Chanamrita. Another time Prabhupada was sitting in the bhajan kutir just on the outside under the veranda with one of his godbrothers, Damodar Maharaj. And I went and I offered him Chanamrita. And he was just sitting there, the sun was shining in it. And he just put his head back and he opened his mouth. And then he let me pour the Chanamrita into his mouth. Then Damodar Maharaj, his godbrother, did the same thing, just put his head back and opened his mouth, and I was pouring Chanamrita in. But it was kind of a strange experience because, you know, Prabhupada, he was our Lord and Master, the big father figure, protector and everything, and then he's kind of acting like a little baby, you have to feed him. It was a new experience that I had with Prabhupada.
Prabhupada really liked Mayapur. You know, he seemed really relaxed in Mayapur when we would come. I remember the one time we went up to his quarters when he first got there, and of course I'd follow him in. He was setting everything up and he was just looking out his window. You know, his windows of course were on each side of his room. So he walked in his front door, and he just looked out his window, and you know, then it was just stretches of fields everywhere. It was wide open and very tranquil, very peaceful. And he would just chant, you know, and look out there. And one time he turned, and he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, "So, Srutakirti Maharaj, you like it here in Mayapur?" And I said, "Yes, Prabhupada, very much." The way his quarters was set up there, they had the padding, you know, across the entire room. So sometimes you could go in there in the middle of the day and Prabhupada would just be laying on the floor, and he'd have his feet over the big bolster pillows that were against the walls. He would just move one out a little bit, so he'd just have his legs hanging over the bolster pillow, and he'd just be just relaxing. And his morning walk was always right outside his room. As soon as he'd go down the steps, he was already on his walk, right? But he also always knew everything that was, who was around, who wasn't around, who was missing the walk. You know, because sometimes if he was going out, get down to the bottom of the stairs and he would ask, "Where's such and such? You know, where's this devotee? Where's that devotee?" One time he asked, you know, he said, I don't know who it was, he said, "Where's this devotee?" And someone said, "Oh, he's sick, Prabhupada." Prabhupada kind of chuckled. And I said, "Yes, Prabhupada, I think he has morning sickness." And then Prabhupada laughed. He said, "Yes, that is the difficulty." Expected everyone to be up in the morning. And, you know, he never minimized that. Always did the opposite, you know, even with the people that traveled with him. Because we were the ones affected too by that, you know, so-called jet lag and stuff as he traveled around, but he wasn't interested in hearing about it.
Prabhupada was so happy that we had cows. He said, "This is very auspicious." He said, "If the cows are grazing on the land where we're going to build the temple, then by passing cow dung and walking over the land, it's going to make it very auspicious for the temple." Prabhupada wanted us to feed the local villagers, so we had, even before we had a building, we had a big pot for cooking and distributing prasadam. Prabhupada used to go on walks, and he liked to walk along the pathways in between the fields. He called these the little highways. As he'd be walking, then the villagers would offer him respect and pay obeisances. was a very informal, friendly environment with all the local villagers. Prabhupada would walk out in the fields and then he'd look and say, here there'll be a spiritual city one day.
I have seen that Prabhupada morning walking time, one villagers, he is taking some sabji, vegetables to nearby market. Then Prabhupada stops suddenly. Then he says, why you are going? I have to sell this vegetable to the market. Then Prabhupada says, why not you are giving to the temple? You can serve Radha Govinda by giving your vegetables. Then he has agreed, he purchased all the vegetables, big bucket he purchased. Then he told Jayapataka, then Jayapataka paid his amount. He told that vegetable man, please you come every day and talk to the temple manager and give sabji, vegetable, fresh vegetables to the Radha Govinda. He has all the time mind to give fresh flowers, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. I have seen also sometimes in Calcutta somebody purchase not fresh fruits. So he was very annoyed. Why you do not buy the fresh fruits for Radha Govinda? So I have seen same thing, fresh vegetables he likes to offer Krishna.
Prabhupada was going on a walk and he called me because he said he wanted me to take the part of the material scientist. Then I said to him, all right, speaking as a scientist, I said, we will not argue whether a soul exists or not. We'll just take it as a given that a soul exists. So my question to you is that we will create the right properties in our laboratory and in our test tubes so that your Krishna will send a soul into a test tube. Is that premise accepted by you? Is that acceptable? Because if I was thinking, if I can get Prabhupada to say yes, then I'll say then we have created life. And then Prabhupada just said, you rascal scientist, you will not tell Krishna where he has to send a soul.
Prabhupada sometimes used to go for a morning walk there on the Ganges. It used to take about almost 20 minutes to walk there. At that time it was way, way over the other side. And one time actually they all took bath there. They were all sannyasis, I think, or at least brahmacharis and sannyasis. And Prabhupada said, you can take a bath if you like. I said, Prabhupada, we didn't bring any gamchas. I said, it's okay, no one's around. You can go in your kopin. So everybody jumped in the Ganga, and then Prabhupada went in also. He had a gamcha, his servant bought him a gamcha. And he also went in. And then they started fighting, splashing and everything like that. And Prabhupada said that, this is okay. He said, Lord Chaitanya, he was also doing this. Then someone started to splash Prabhupada, Madhavisa Maharaj, I believe. Mildly, in a playful way, but he was giving little splashes with his hand. But Prabhupada said, don't become too familiar with your guru. He reprimanded him. And Guru creeping in, and they were pouring water on Prabhupada's head with their hands, chanting Chintamani Prakada Sadmasukal, chanting Chintamani prayers. Another time he said, if you build a road from our ashram to the Ganga, nice road, he said, I will come every morning for a walk here. And another time he said, be careful, because the Ganga could come and take away all of our property. For several years, the Ganga was constantly changing course. Then the course was diverted right over to the property. But then the government took action. They made some proper embankments there with bricks. But it came very, very close, right up to the road. But now it's gone back to a steady course, which is a very good symptom, because in the Navadvita Mahatmya, it's predicted that for several hundred years, about 400 years, the Ganga will constantly do this, actually flood the whole area. And then after 400 years, Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions, then she'll go back to a steady course again. And then he said many, many bathing ghats will be built on the Ganga, and many, many temples will be built, and many household dwellings will come up. And there will be, of course, the Adbhut Mandir, a very astonishing temple, will rise, from which service to Lord Chaitanya will spread all over the world. So now we're seeing this. Now the Ganga is more or less settled. There are permanent ghats being made. ISKCON's made one. Madhav Maharaj has made a permanent ghat. And there's hundreds and hundreds of dwelling places now, all over the place. We have our Grihastapara. Then just outside the master plan of our project, there's so many houses. And the community members also of the Chaitanya Math and Jogpit, Gaudiya Math, they're also building little houses. There's hundreds of little houses. It's all protected by Nityananda Prabhu. So these are good signs.
One day it was a Govardhan Puja, and we built a big mountain of rice, and we fed many people. And the people took their leaf plates after taking prasadam, and then they threw behind the building. And then Prabhupada was living up on the second floor. And we were sitting in the room together, and then he heard dogs barking and kids shouting. And so then he got up and walked back on the veranda behind his room, and he looked over and he saw that there was this big pile of leaf plates of people that had eaten their meal, and there was little scraps on the plates. So then there were some very poor children with sticks in their hand, fighting off some very hungry dogs, trying to get the scraps of food that people hadn't finished eating on their plate. When Prabhupada saw that how these children were so hungry that they had to eat the things that people threw away, and how they were fighting with the dogs to get these scraps of food, tears swelled in his eyes, and he said, we had to see that nobody goes hungry within a 10-mile radius. The temple is the house of God. God's everyone's father, Krishna's everyone's father, so in the presence of the Father, the Son doesn't go hungry. So like that, we have to make an arrangement that people get fed. And so that was inspiration for regular prasadam distribution.
And I remember one time watching Srila Prabhupada, while all the people from the villages were out taking prasadam, he would go to the little window in the hut and then look out and watch them. And then I would remember the verse, Chatu Vidhasri Bhagavat Prasada, that the spiritual master is very satisfied if he sees the devotees taking prasadam. And he looked very happy, he looked very satisfied.
Prabhupada was trying to involve his god brothers and work cooperatively with them. Especially he made a lot of effort with Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, because they were very old friends. He used to come and visit Prabhupada in his house and stay at their guest house. So he was inviting him to come even to the west and see the temple, see how the preaching was going on. But he declined, he said it was too far. So he invited him to come over to Mayapur. So he agreed to come. So then Prabhupada had him share a seat on the Vyasasan with him. And he was very, very accommodating and loving to him.
Prabhupada invited all of his godbrothers to come, and they were all coming, one at a time or two at a time, throughout that whole morning. And he spoke to everyone, and he said exactly the same thing to everyone. He said, we're having some success in our preaching, and so we have some good facilities now. And he said, and you are all experienced preachers. You have been trained by our Prabhupada. He said, so I have all these buses coming out. It's that time when they were bringing all those Mercedes buses. He said, I have many buses. So I can give you all a bus, and I will give you men. And you just go out and preach. He said, if you have any problem in your temple of maintenance, he said, I will also give you men for your temples and to help you maintain in the temple. He said, there's only one condition. He said, that you distribute my books. My books are to be distributed on these parties. He said, but you will lead, you will preach. Unfortunately, not one of them accepted his offer. And Prabhupada really tried to get them to work together again.
Hare